faithfulness is at the core of me being a founder.
Good business values and ethics come from the Bible.
Lead with your relationship with Christ. Lead with your knowledge of the gospel.
What is a faithful founder?
Yeah, that's a good question. What is a faithful founder? To me, I think there's a lot of ways that you can answer that question, right? But the thing that comes to my mind is we all have ways of glorifying God in our life. We all have talents and skills and abilities that God has blessed us with, and not to uplift ourselves, right? Not to boast of ourselves, but to glorify His name, to glorify our Savior's name, Jesus Christ, right? And so for me, I think in order to be a faithful founder, you're taking your skills and your abilities and your talents and putting them into starting this company, to launching this venture, this startup, right? And knowing that your purpose in doing, your ultimate purpose, I should say, because there's a lot of different purposes, but your ultimate purpose in doing this is to glorify the name of God, is to glorify Jesus Christ, right? Because He has made us joint heirs with Him in the kingdom of God, and that is what He asks of us, right? Is to glorify His name so that He may glorify the Father's name, right? And to me, that is what a faithful founder does. Yeah.
I guess, what challenges have you faced since you've approached it from more of a faithful founder perspective than a traditional, maybe business owner?
Yeah, I don't know, because it's one of those things that I've done a bunch of side hustles, you know what I'm saying? Like, I've done the e-com stuff and the marketing funnels and, a bunch of different stuff, man. But I've always been a Christian. I've always believed in God and Jesus Christ, but I don't think I was ever approaching those things as I'm leading with my relationship with Christ, right? I'm leading with my faith. I'm leading with my discipleship. That was never happening, right? And so I think the biggest thing for me is that I'm leading with that. I'm not leading with wanting to be a founder, even though I do. I'm not leading with my desires to make good money, because I do. I'm not leading with my desires to build an awesome company that's going to do really cool things, even though that's what I want to do. I am leading with my discipleship. I am leading with my faith in Jesus Christ. I'm leading with my belief that God is who He says He is, which is that personal, loving, all-powerful creator that the Christian belief system teaches us that He is. And I know that He is, right? And so I think for me, I can't speak for others, obviously, but from my experience going from, a business owner or a side hustler who happens to be Christian, as opposed to a faithful founder that's leading with my discipleship, that is the biggest difference, is that I'm putting that at the forefront of what I'm doing, not as a secondary motive or description, I guess. Yeah,
That's cool. Makes sense. Could you share like a pivotal moment, maybe that your faith has really impacted your decision making in business or being a founder?
Yeah. I discussed this a little bit with the episode with Travis and Brad, but talking about how I took that leap of faith to do this full time, right? I didn't know what I was going to do, because I felt like, okay, I'm building this company, so clearly I need to do what every founder does and continue to work as I build it. And then once it can replace the income, then I jump on full time. And I applied for a ridiculous amount of jobs, more jobs than I ever have applied for in my life. And I looked at my resume and I'm like, I've never had a hard time getting an interview. I've never had a hard time getting a job, like, ever. Like, it's just never been a problem. I'm not saying that to brag. I'm just like, that's just been my experience, and because I feel like I performed everywhere I've gone, right? And so it was a humbling experience and a really sad experience, honestly. I'm like, maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I'm not the sales professional that I thought it was. Maybe I'm not. Maybe at 30 years old, I'm just totally oblivious to my own mediocrity. And I do feel like I'm a pretty mediocre person. I just refuse to stay mediocre, to stay average, And so it was very humbling in that regard. But then, praying with my wife and just pleading to the Lord, like, I've got to see a path here. Like, I've got to have something, because I'm not saying it's going to happen tomorrow, but you know how much I love my children and my wife and how much I want to take care of my family. and with the love that I feel for my children, my wife, is not even comparable to the love that he has for them and for me, And so if that's the case, then I've got to be able to take care of my family, and because I followed your instruction to resign from my previous job. I followed like the promptings I felt like I had, the personal relation that I felt like I had to do so, and which was a big leap there in the beginning, but and then feeling like, my wife saying when we said amen, I feel like something's coming down the road. And then for that answer to be, and people can listen to the other podcast to go into depth with it, but for that answer to be, this is what you're supposed to do full time, like taking a huge pay cut, number one. Number two, it's like what founder jumps in full time from the very beginning? I don't really know of that many, that do it like that. But feeling very confident through the circumstances. And people can call it coincidence, that's fine. But I find the more I pray, the more coincidences occur, so therefore they're not coincidences, and that was anyways, that choice of having that faith and saying, okay, I'm going to stop applying for jobs. I'm going to go in on this 1,000%. This is going to be my only focus, right? And my relationship with God, more importantly. That was a huge decision of faith, right? Like that's the only thing I could go off of, and it's worked out so far, and I have the faith that it'll continue to work out even when things are hard, because entrepreneurship is rough, dude. Founding is hard. I don't even know how hard it is right now. I know it's only going to get harder, but I know that I was instructed to do this path, or to walk this path, to choose this path, and to I don't want to say forsake, but to stop looking for other work and just do this full time, So yeah.
I like that. It's inspiring. How do you maintain your faith amongst all of the chaos?
Dude, that's a good question, man. How do I maintain my faith?
Do you have practice?
I don't feel like I maintain my faith. I feel like Christ maintains Christ continuously calls to me, as we know through scripture, when we feel a call to Christ, when we feel a call to discipleship, it is not us that make that decision. It is first the Spirit speaking to the heart, saying, follow in the footsteps of the Son of Man, right? Follow in the footsteps of Yahweh, right? Like that is what the Spirit is saying, right? Jesus of Nazareth, right? Come and follow him. Drop your nets and come and follow him. That is what the Spirit calls us to do. So am I choosing to have faith? Yes. Am I maintaining my own faith? No, because my faith is maintained only by the grace of Jesus Christ. No, I believe that can only happen by a changing of the heart, which you have to, what Christ says, turn basically your heart of stone has to become a heart of flesh, right? And so that part, only by the grace of Jesus Christ are we even able to enter into a relationship with him, but we have to maintain that relationship. So I think it's maintaining faith, and I think it's maintaining relationship, right? And for me, what does that look like? That means daily prayer, frequent fasting. For me, I know some people may disagree. I think going to church, whatever church, right? As long as it's biblical, and it abides by what Christ taught, right? Not what you think Christ taught, what Christ actually taught, right? So frequent fasting, frequent prayer, attending services, right? Being a part of the community, serving others, right? Those are the facets that for me, through spiritual leaders, that I've been able to say, okay, this is how I maintain my relationship with Christ. Because when we do those things, it's for us, yes, but Christ also says you're doing those things unto me, right? When you serve, you're doing that unto me, right? Like when you pray, right, you're glorifying God because you're entering into prayer saying, I'm humbling myself before the creator of the universe, before the creator of me, recognizing my unworthiness to enter into this relationship, but yet he allows me to enter into it, which is just insane when you think about that, right? Like it honestly blows my mind when I think about that. So anyways, I go off on tangents a lot, but all that to be said is I'm not maintaining faith. Christ is maintaining that faith for me. I'm doing my part in maintaining a relationship with Christ through his grace. No.
Yeah, I think that's biblical.
Good.
How do you feel your faith has shaped your approach to risk-taking in business?
Oh, that's a good one. I think it's made me more confident knowing that if I follow the revelation I receive, if I follow the whisperings of the Spirit, right? If I follow the answers to my prayers, that no matter what happens, whether from the outside it looks good or bad, it is good for me. It is good for my soul. It is good for my relationship with Christ. It is good for my salvation, right? To follow him, right? And I maybe not salvation, but my sanctification is probably the better way to say that, right? Yeah, and so I feel that following those things doesn't mean it's not easy, or it doesn't mean it's not hard, doesn't make it easy to do those things, but knowing when I walk into those things that I have done my best to heed the call, to follow the prompting, to follow the Spirit, right? So I know that it's going to be for my betterment. Now, if let's say, because a lot of times we mix up our own emotions, like what Paul says, the heart is deceitful. Christ said that. I mean, that's why Paul said it, right? But, I can't remember, I'm thinking of one of the epistles of Paul where he talks about the heart being deceitful, right? And a lot of people say, listen to your heart. And we don't listen. You shouldn't listen to the heart all the time. You need to listen to the Spirit. And when your heart and your mind are in conjunction with the gospel, that's when you're making the correct decision from a gospel perspective. But with all that being said, there's a lot of times that we follow our heart and we follow our emotion, thinking we're following the Spirit, thinking we're following a prompting. We're not, right? In those circumstances, I find that even if it wasn't a prompting, even if it wasn't an answer to a prayer, if you compared it, or I should say measured it up to the gospel, and it's in accordance with the, not the laws, but the precepts, the principles of the gospel, right? It's up to par with what Christ taught us, then you're going to be okay, right? You cannot go wrong in a direction as long as you know that you're in coherence, that you're in harmony with Christ's gospel, right? Because all good things come from God. And so with that being said, even if it wasn't a prompting, if I followed it and it was still good, I still did the right thing as a disciple, I don't think you can go wrong. I think it's when you don't follow, you don't act in line with the gospel, when you step outside of your discipleship and then you make those decisions, because those are the times that you get greedy. Those are the times that you get angry. Those are the times that you do the things that are unethical, right? Because that's just the nature of man. We're fallen, you know what I'm saying? And when we're not living up to the precepts of the gospel, then that is the natural occurrence that's going to happen, right? So I don't know if that was the best answer, but that's kind of what's coming to mind here.
Yeah. Being a founder, you come across, I think, a problem or whatever money is. But how would you say you plan on managing money?
Yeah, I am managing money.
Exactly. How are you doing it? Is it like, how do you stewardship? How are faithful founders supposed to look at money?
In their personal lives or through the business perspective?
Both.
Okay, so I'll start with the personal life, right? Through the personal life, for me, I think a faithful founder looks at money, number one, as a blessing, right? Because there's a lot of people in this world that do not have money and do not have means. It's a blessing that you should be grateful for, not look at me, I have all this money because of everything that I did. Oh, I am blessed to have this money because the Lord saw fit for me to have it. I think the second thing is finding out why you're supposed to have that money, right? Like, why were you blessed with that? Is it to take care of your family 1,000%, right? Is it to take care of yourself? I think, today to be healthy, you got to have money, which is a really sad thing. You know what I'm saying? So for me personally, this is the gospel according to Jamie Kane, right? I think having that money for me is I really want to put a lot of that towards my health and my family's health, personally. And so, but anyways, going back to the original question, it's okay, why do I have that money? Who am I supposed to bless with this? How am I supposed to operate, right? I also look at money as the ability to, not live in desperation, to not worry about, like, can I give my kids that next meal, which is a massive blessing, because there's lots of people in this world that are stronger than me and then stronger than a lot of people that will never be able to have that comfortability, never have that assurance that they will be able to offer that next meal to their child, which is crazy when you think about the third world, but what Christ said, or even in America, man, look at America, how many people are homeless and don't know if they're going to be able to afford groceries for their kids, right? And like Christ said, is like, the poor you shall always have with you, So if you have money, I think it's your responsibility to bless the poor, because what you're doing to them, like I said earlier, is what you're doing unto Christ. We're commanded to do that, right? So I think that's number one. You have the money, it's a blessing. Find out why you have the blessing and operate in the way the Lord would have you operate with that blessing, right? As far as money from a founder perspective, the money you're receiving is not your money. Sure, you're getting it. It's revenue. It becomes yours, but it's coming from somewhere else, right? It's coming from a customer that's trusting you. It's coming from investors that believe in you. Maybe you're very early on, you're doing the friends and family thing, right? Or the angels, like all people put in their trust in you that you're going to be able to do this thing, and trusting your word that you're going to do everything you can with their money, which is now under your stewardship, to do with the talents, to multiply, to show that you're not taking them for granted when they give that to you. And so when I look at money from a faithful founder perspective in a startup environment, it is, I'm a steward of these funds. I cannot be lackadaisical. I cannot be careless. I cannot be ungrateful. I have to be the exact opposite of all those things with this and manage it well, right? And that's, to me, I think, once again, my personal opinion, obviously, and this is my podcast, but that's how right now, that's how I feel. Yeah.
Through your experience, since starting Help Ghost, how have you handled stress?
Not well. This is, once again, from my personal experience, so I can't speak for anybody else. My entire life, I've dealt with stress very, very poorly. I have mental health issues that I've had for a long time. I have an anxiety disorder that really makes stress hard for me, So I that's one thing that I know is everybody's got multiple crosses to bear and to carry with Christ, right? And that's one of mine, is to manage stress, and to figure that out. And I've been praying a lot about that recently, of how do I do that? And that's been a question for a long time. And the only thing that I think has helped me is looking at the people that the Lord has blessed my life with and brought into my life, right? Like, I'm talking about my wife, who is always supportive, who is very down to earth, that doesn't get stressed very easily, and is always there to comfort me. Right? I look at my kids, because I can't let the outside world affect my relationship with them, or at least can't let them see how it's affecting me. I personally believe that. And so I have to put those things aside when I'm with my kids, I'm not perfect at that, man. I screw up all the time with that, but so I look at what the Lord has blessed me with is my wife, is my children, and then it's friends. And I have really good friends that I can talk to and just, have a conversation with. And I find many times that the Lord, for my life, it's been more than I could ever count, but the Lord has blessed me through other people, right? That is like, I just find it interesting when God says, I created, man and woman in my image, right? What God, what Genesis says, man and woman, he created them in his image, right? That means that we see God in everyone around us, right? If we truly look for it, we will see the creator in every person around us, And so for me, I just sit there and I think, okay, the Lord has clearly surrounded me with those that can help me with this thing that I'm clearly not good at. So I need to not to take advantage of people, but take advantage of those relationships in a healthy way, And the hope, my prayer is that I will be able to help those people in some way that they struggle, because that is the gospel, right? That is one of the parts of the gospel, at least a part of the community that Christ clearly set up with his church, is the body of Christ, and us uplifting each other. They help me with my stress, my anxieties, and my weaknesses, and hopefully in my weakness and imperfection, that I can bless their lives in some way, So that's not the best answer. Obviously, I'm still trying to figure those things out, but for right now, that's probably the best answer I can give.
Yeah. Being a founder has leadership aspects.
Yeah.
That's honestly the core of it.
Yeah, 100%.
What would you say it takes to be a leader?
Oh, that's a good one, man. That question is, from the Christian perspective, which it's funny, man, because it's, just recently I was listening to a podcast. I'll go off on a tangent. I'll come back to the question. I was listening to a podcast, and it's the one I sent you, by the way. And they talked about how Christianity is not a religion, because Christianity is the truth, right? Christianity is by what all things are built up upon, because all things are built up upon the grace of God. We would not exist. This world would not exist. This universe would not exist. None of this is an accident. You are not an accident. I'm not an accident. This world is not an accident, right? And so it's we don't follow religion. We follow the truth, right? And that's what we follow the way, right? That's what the early Christians called Christianity, the followers of the way. That's what first and second century Christians said, And so to answer your question about how do faithful founders lead, we have to follow the way. We have to follow the truth, right? Because Christ clearly taught how to be a leader. Christ was the ultimate leader. He was a leader of men. He was the leader of his sheep, his discipleship, and he's a leader of the world, right? And when he comes back, he will lead all of us into the kingdom of heaven, right? And so I think for me, he talks about like the first among you shall be, or the least among you shall be the greatest, right? And that's what we have to be. We have to become the least. What does that mean? That means transform ourselves, shrinking ourselves and our egos and our wants and our desires to instead reflect the will of the Lord and what is best for those around us, to be that servant first, right? That is leadership at its core, is serving. It's not bossing. It's not micromanaging. It is serving and setting the example, right? And I've talked about that in a secular way, like on my, with one-on-one with people on my LinkedIn, I've talked about it, how leaders are culture creators and they're pace setters, right? Christ, you look at him and he clearly was the culture creator. He created the culture that we all live in if you're Christian. If you live in the Western world, you may not be Christian, but you're swimming in Christian waters, as Tom Hahn, the author of Dominion, would say, right? It's a great book, but I would highly recommend. And he was clearly the pace setter because he set the example for us. So he served, he set the example, and he created the culture. That's what you should do in following Christ. Those three things as you as a disciple will set the table for everybody else that enters under your stewardship as a leader. Spit on the mic.
I agree on that. I think part of being a leader is developing a like-minded team. People that,
mission focused.
Yeah. That'll really join side.
Yeah.
So when you're developing your team and the team that you currently have, who are you looking for? This is part of being a founder.
Yeah. I was just on another podcast where the guy asked me this question. I shouldn't say the guy, he's one of my best friends, Jonathan Barrett. His podcast is For the Masses. Highly recommend anybody go listen to his show where he talks about leadership from the Christian perspective, which is really cool. I'm talking about entrepreneurship from the Christian perspective, right? So, which is a form of leadership. So we had a really good conversation. But as far as, finding people, I don't know if I'm, the reason not corrected may not be the right word, but, put my 2 cents in with mission focus as opposed to like-minded, right? The thing that we should be like-minded on is our ethical values, right? And I'm not saying that my co-founders had to be Christian. I'm not saying that the people that will eventually work for our company or be investors, we're not saying they have to be Christian, right? We're not. What we're saying is that they need to operate off of ethical and moral grounds, because I do believe that good is objective. I do believe that evil is objective. I do believe that the truth is objective, right? I don't fall into relativism, right? Moral relativism is honestly, I think a great evil in this world, right? Because you can just be the arbiter of what you think is good and bad. And that's a dangerous proposition, right? And so with all that being said, I just care that the people around me are like-minded in that they do believe there's objective truth. They do believe that there is objective good and evil that is not relative, and that their mission is to act as a ethical and moral individual to the best of their abilities, right? That's what I care about. As far as the mission focused part, you can't surround yourself with people that don't share the vision of the business. They don't share the mission, the goal of your startup and what you're building, right? And so you have to surround yourself, outside of that first piece of the ethical and moral grounds of, do you catch the vision? Do you see where we want to take this? Do you see what we're building? Do you see how we want to serve people? Do you want to see how we want to disrupt the industry? It's a yes or no question, right? And you can figure that out in a conversation relatively quickly, I think. And so to me, those are the things that you need to, I hate the term check the box, but you got to check those 2 boxes, when it comes to your founding team. Because if your founding team, is going to steer the ship. Your founding team and your founding investors will steer the ship, right? And so if you make the wrong decision, the ship's going to sink. That is mission critical when it comes to, if you're not a solopreneur, right? If you're not a solo founder, which I don't recommend. I know some people do. I don't. then that's a critical decision. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What pieces of advice, or I don't know, I guess 3 pieces of advice you would give to maybe a founder who's found himself revisiting his why?
3 different reasons.
Could be 3, could be 5. Different ideas, because like imagine this is pretty common. People get in a situation or put themselves in a situation or get the opportunity to be a founder of something.
Yeah.
But they don't know how to go about figuring out the why. Why am I doing this?
Sure.
Because like in your situation, obviously you were given this opportunity, but you found like the whole reason why, the realization, like Christ gave you this opportunity.
Yeah.
But for somebody who hasn't found that yet, I mean,
I don't think gave is the right word. I think led.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Because he isn't, he does give us the gift freely of salvation. We're the ones that have to confess the name of Christ, right? But outside of that, Christ, he doesn't make things. Christianity is not easy, right? When he told or Peter and Andrew, right, to drop your nets and come follow me, like that's a short verse in the New Testament.
Yeah, that's true.
But what comes with that? That's the livelihood of Peter and his brother. Peter was married. We know that. You know what I'm saying? That's the livelihood of his family, right? It's everything that he ever knew. It's giving of the comfortability of his life and saying, I don't know who this man is, but it's not just dropping like his physical nets. It's dropping every metaphorical net in his life and following Christ even to where he was crucified upside down. We're not following an easy path. It is not easy, right? And so Christ, that wasn't your question, but Christ doesn't give us a lot. He leads us to everything. But what he gives us is salvation. Then he asks us, you're the one that has to make the choice. You're the one that has to make the journey. I will lead you, but you're the one that has to take the step. I will strengthen you, but you have to make the resolve to do it, And so I feel led to this, right? And by the grace of God and by the will of the Lord, Christ has clearly opened the doors for us, which has been awesome, And so I don't say that to take away from Christ. I say that to say that to glorify his name, and that even in the hardship, he has given me his grace, always he's given me his grace, As far as advice to a founder about the why thing, I'll go back to a piece of advice that a mentor gave me. Your why changes over time, right? But if you don't know what your why is in the beginning, you might want to rethink what you're doing. I clearly knew what my why was. You know what I'm saying? My why was I wanted to build something because I love to build things. My why was I knew I wanted to be a startup founder since my sophomore year in college, and that was just my motivation. Everything I did was to learn how to be a founder. Every job I took, I felt like was building me up to this point. And a lot of times I forgot that in the moment. Right. But then I would look back and think, this is why I did this. This is why I was here. This is why I learned there. And that's what's led me to this moment, If you don't know your why, then you need to reevaluate your idea. You need to reevaluate what your actual desires, right? Because if you're struggling, like, I don't really know why I'm doing this. Yeah. Maybe you shouldn't be doing it. You know what I'm saying? If you do know your why, right, then pursue that with all of your heart, mind, and soul, right? Like get after it, right? Follow that, because that why, I believe, was if you're following the gospel of Jesus Christ, and even if you're not, God works with everybody in all circumstances, right? But we also know the adversary, right, can place desires in our hearts very easily, right? And so you need to make sure that desire is in line with the gospel of Christ, right? If that is so, and that desire is there, it's been placed there by Christ for your perfecting, for your growth, right? And to glorify his name, right? And to glorify God's name. God the Father, I should say, right? And then over time, your why changes. I know my why is going to change, right? It has to, because eventually you reach to a point, if you've been successful in the worldly term successful, right? With monetarily and growing the company and so on and so forth, which I want to be successful in all of those ways, right? If you are successful in those ways, then your why probably it eventually will evolve or change, or it just won't be sufficient anymore. Like for me, just having the desire to be a startup founder eventually is going to be like, well, I am the startup founder and I've done well and I've been successful, that's my prayer at least. And so if I get to that point and say, well, what is my new why? My new why is to make this the world's leading, company in this field, or to my secondary why. I shouldn't say my secondary, but my accompanying why is to build a company around the culture of Christ, right? Around the values of Christianity, like true Christianity, not modernized Christianity that I think a lot of people mistake for what true Christianity is, right? So if you don't know what your why is, reassess. If you do know what your why is, pursue it and know where the why came from, or at least identify, make sure it's coming from the right place, and then be ready for your why to evolve and change and to re-motivate yourself. Because motivation is a fleeting thing, man. It comes and it goes. And so you need to continuously not motivate, but be disciplined, and knowing that motivation will come if you're disciplined. Yeah.
I really like that. It makes a lot of sense. How different would you say, I mean, honestly, just on a personal note, how different would you say you approach goal setting than like I say normal founder, but I'm saying it from the world's perspective.
Yeah.
Sure. What they would stereotypically say is a normal founder.
Yeah. Like, because you are a secular founder, right?
Yes. Yeah. Secular founder.
Yes.
Like, how do you set your goals? Like making sure that they're aligned with Christ. Like, what does that even mean?
Yeah. So as far as goal setting, I think right now at my heart, I'm like, okay, are my goals in conflict with my discipleship? Right. And if they are, then the goals need to be adjusted. Right. And then we need to figure out why it's in conflict with the discipleship, why it's in conflict with the gospel, right? What I'm called to be as a follower of Jesus Christ, right? I don't feel right now any of my goals are in conflict with that, and then, which doesn't mean that I'm not saying I'm perfect. I just think our goals right now are just like, to get the full market and to make sure our customers have a great experience with our product and get to additional funding, right? Which, in order to grow the business. And so we can continue to glorify God's name, right? Like we have a lot of goals, but, I don't think we don't have like all these micro goals. Like right now they're very macro,
When you were creating this podcast, why did you choose the name Faithful Founder?
Because it encompasses everything I wanted to be. You know what I'm saying? Like I guess now I am a founder, and I guess I am faithful as much as I, can be in my imperfection, in my follies, right? And my fallen nature, you know what I'm saying? But it's also things I want to continue to be.
Yeah.
Like I want to continue to be faithful. I want to continue to be a founder. I don't want this thing to fail or fall or flop. You know what I'm saying? Like and even after this, like our goal, we have lots of goals, right? But I don't want to just have a one-time thing. I want to continue to be a serial startup founder. This is what I love to do, And so I think it's just a reminder of what I want to be. Like, okay, like, and not that I place my identity in that, because I don't. You have to place your identity in Jesus, right? You have to place your identity in being a child of God through acceptance of his son, right? And so that's where, and I've struggled with that a lot, man. I fall on that a lot. I'm not saying I'm perfect in that by any means. I'm not. It's something that I need to be way better at, right? But as far as like one of the things I want to be is I want to be a faithful founder. I want that to serve as a continuous reminder. And I also want it to serve as an inspiration to people out there that your faith should be at the forefront of everything that you do. Like too many people compartmentalize their life. And to be honest with you, if you're putting your faith as a Christian in a box and it's not showing in all that you do, you're doing it wrong. You know what I'm saying? And so it's it could be the same thing with anything. Like the podcast could have been called Ethical Founder, Moral Founder, Good Founder, Nice Founder, right? Like it could have been, Ambitious Founder, whatever it is. But the descriptor that I chose as a reminder and an inspiration is, hey man, lead with the faith, right? Lead with your relationship with Christ. Lead with your knowledge of the gospel, right? Because I used to use this metaphor all the time, metaphor, analogy, whatever. Is that you imagine a campfire, right? And the rocks, I'm talking about a real campfire. You put the rocks around, right? You light the fire, and if you go to pick up one of those rocks around the fire, it's hot. Like no one's gonna pick up one of those rocks, right? At least you should. I'm sure the people that have. You shouldn't pick up those rocks because they're hot, because of fire. Well, the fire is the gospel of Jesus Christ. The fire is the relationship you have with Jesus, right? With the Savior, right? With the Messiah and with God the Father, right? And with the Spirit. And it all encompassing, that is your relationship. And the rocks are the other facets of your life. It's your marriage, your fatherhood, for me, being a founder, being a member of the community. It's all the whatever other things you are, right? That the gospel of Jesus Christ should be heating everything else up, right? And that for me is, I guess, it's a symbolism of that name, faithful founder, because the faithfulness is at the core of me being a founder, at the core of me being everything. At least that's what I wanted to be, my core. I've messed up a lot, man. I have got my mistakes and my sins and my imperfections and my weaknesses. It's I'm ashamed of a lot of them. All of them I am ashamed of. I shouldn't say a lot of them, but all of them I'm ashamed of. More so than others. And so my hope, my prayer is that this will continue to be at the core of everything that I am, but for this purpose, it'd be at the core of me being a founder and an owner, an entrepreneur, and a partner, So, yeah.
I have another question too that kind of spurred up.
No. Dun, dun, dun.
But what is that conviction? Should you even have it as a founder, or should you be confident in everything that you do? Like,
you mean, sorry, like you said,
that conviction where you feel like you stumbled and messed up a lot, like that comes from a humble place.
Yeah.
Like, why do you have that? Like, straight up, why do you have that?
That's good. I think I've always struggled with like self-confidence a ton and self-worth, So I think there's a part of that comes from an unhealthy place of just that. It's funny, man, because I've seen a lot of people say like Christianity makes people's self-worth like decrease, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, because I've also heard a lot of people talk about, like, I've heard a lot of Christians say like, oh, I'm trash, I'm garbage, I'm the lowest of the low, I'm nothing. Or I'm like, none of those things are true, right? Now, like, I think it's good to recognize I am a sinner and I am perfect and I am broken. But that broken things, being broken and being imperfect and being, and having our struggles and our pitfalls, man, doesn't make you worthless. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't make you trash or unlovable. It doesn't make you a castaway. It doesn't do anything. You were saying that. God's not saying that. The gospel of Jesus Christ is not saying that. As a matter of fact, the gospel of Jesus Christ is saying the opposite. The gospel of Jesus Christ says, I loved you so much that I sent my only begotten Son to take on the flesh of man from his throne and to come and to have no beauty behold him. Average, right? Nobody would know that this is literally the God that you read about in Genesis, to have him walk among you in sandals and a tunic, right? And dirt, and be persecuted, be spit upon, right? Have his own followers leave him, right? Have one of his own that he chose betray him. And then to go and have, when you read about the deaths of Jesus Christ is not a mythical figure, even secularly, no story worth their salt says Jesus Christ didn't exist, right? There's clearly a man named Jesus that walked, this earth, right? But for the people that say, oh, mythical figure, whatever, like, you read all these other mythical figures in these like heroes and these stories and these creatures and gods that people worship, and none of them, if they die, it's like a hero's death. Crucifixion, there's a reason that Paul says in the New Testament that the Greeks are confused by God himself being crucified, because it was embarrassing, because it was the lowest of the low. It was supposed to humiliate who it was, right? That received that punishment. And so to go back, you have the God of all coming down and taking part willingly. No one, like Christ said, no one takes my life. I give it freely. I lay it down. Greater love hath no man than this. Now, he laid down his life for his friends. And so he took that punishment willingly. He received the lashings that I was supposed to receive. and he received the punishment that I'm supposed to receive. He carried his cross to Golgotha, and he was nailed to it, and he was mocked, and he was spit upon even there. And you think Christianity teaches you that you're worthless, that you're trash, that you don't deserve love? That is the greatest form of love, and he did it because he loved you. You know what I'm saying? And so my conviction comes from knowing that I am loved. I forget that every single day of my life, that I am loved, and that in all of my sins, and sin is real. I don't care what anybody says, we sin every day. And if you don't think sin is real and it's all just relative, like I said in the beginning, you need to just look in the mirror, man. Like, we're not perfect. We're just not. And that's okay, because we're loved. You know, I'd rather be loved than perfect. Yeah, anyways, that's where my conviction comes from, because I know that I'm loved, that I know that the creator of all decided to do that for me, right? And that God was willing to give up his only begotten son, the one being that didn't deserve the punishment like that is the one that got it, you know? And so that's where my conviction comes from, is to not boast of myself. You know, I will boast of the love that I feel. I will boast of my worth in God's eyes, right? But I will not boast of myself, you know? And so I try to remember that I think there is a balance, because you shouldn't be putting yourself down. You shouldn't be hurting yourself, mentally abusing yourself, you know? But remember your imperfections and glory in them. Glory in not only say glory in your imperfections, but be thankful for your imperfections, because they make it possible to be glorified in Jesus Christ. You know, because if you weren't imperfect, then you wouldn't have the choice. You know what I'm saying? Like, you would just be a robot, and then you wouldn't be able to take part in the glory of Christ.
Yes.
I don't know if I'm making that stuff up. I don't want to make it up a false gospel. That's just what I feel. So yeah, I could be wrong, but I feel like that's, you know, for me, that's one of the messages of the gospel, you know?
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you, Jamie.
Yeah. Peace.